G'day legends! So, Conor is out of UFC 303. Not that it's been confirmed, but I think we're all pretty confident that Conor McGregor is not going to be showing up to UFC 303. It's been 3 days since the press conference was cancelled. There has been no news at all from the UFC. The pay-per-views on ESPN, you cannot buy the pre-order anymore, and the UFC have pulled all of Conor McGregor's free fights from the YouTube channel. So I think all we are sitting around waiting to do is to hear who's going to be replacing the main event of UFC 303, and that's what we are going to be talking about in today's video, because that is a very, very sticky and hard situation for the UFC. There are refund laws in Las Vegas. Firstly, before we get into that, I love the trash talk on YouTube MMA. I love the trash talk in MMA in general. I think it's what makes our sports so fun. We can banter with each other back and forth about the outcome of a fight or a particular fighter and then resolve it on the night when Islam Makhachev does eventually choke out Dustin Poirier. So, when you are doing the banter and the talk back and forth, it is important to give people their flowers when they are right. Otherwise, it all just descends into bullying. So, for the record, on behalf of all of MMA YouTube, MMA Joey was right. 100% right. Just think about this. Dustin Poirier fought last weekend for a title off one win because of the timing and how everything was at lightweight. Michael Chandler might be fighting nobody at the end of the month. Michael Chandler wasted 2 years of his career when there was a good chance of him fighting for the title. MMA Joey was right. MMA is truly a crazy, crazy world and a crazy sport. So here we are, UFC 303, and now here is the big issue and problem. UFC 303, because of inflation, has got some of the highest ticket prices, maybe the highest ticket prices that we have ever seen for a UFC live event. To get there into the arena and sit in one of the seats at the mid-level, the ticket price costs $3,000. And that is because Conor McGregor is coming back after such a horrible injury. People want to see how he is, how he's going. That whole ticket price is built around the show of Conor McGregor stepping back into the octagon. There is now a very good chance, almost a certainty, that that is not going to be happening. And Las Vegas has main event refund laws for their prices. So this is the situation that the UFC is in. For some reason, we don't know why, but we can pretty much guess Conor isn't going to be fighting. That fight is going to be happening in 3 weeks' time. A bunch of people have already bought tickets. I think it might be sold out already. And if they say Conor's not fighting for whatever reason, they will just start to refund their tickets. So what the UFC are scrambling and trying to do, and this is as per Ariel Helwani, is start to put feelers out over who can get in that main event. The thing is, with the price being so high, the UFC pretty much have to come up with a almost UFC 300 level event. It's got to be so big that it justifies the highest ticket price ever, because the UFC love money and they do not want to be making any refunds at all. So what are the options? What can they go with? There's been a lot of talk about Michael Chandler versus Alexander Volkanovski. People don't love that fight. I do. There's a couple of issues with it though, and I'll explain why. I'll explain why I love that fight first. Michael Chandler versus Alexander Volkanovski. Purely because Volk isn't winning another title again. He's never winning another title again. He's too old, and quite frankly, he's just lost that little bit of chip in his step. So he's here for fun fights. If Alexander Volkanovski wants to stay in the UFC and have fun fights and make a lot of money for his family, let him do that. And to come in on short notice and save what needs to be one of the biggest events of the year is going to get him paid and is going to be fun. The problem is, Michael Chandler's been thinking that this fight is going to happen at 170. I don't think he can make 155 on 3 weeks' notice. There's not enough time. The second thing is, Michael Chandler versus Alexander Volkanovski. I think it's fun. I think it clears up Volkanovski so that Max Holloway can go fight Ilia Topuria rather than Ilia Topuria rematching Volkanovski. But I don't think it's a main event worthy fight. I think it's a fun co-main event at best. So some people have said, what about Michael Chandler versus Max Holloway? A lot of people like that. I don't. I think Max Holloway has earned himself 3 title shots. I think he's earned himself a BMF fight, a title shot against whoever he wants. I know it's a gimmick belt, but he still earned it. And Michael Chandler, going to church every Sunday isn't a BMF. Then you've got Max Holloway versus Islam Makhachev. He's definitely earned that after beating Justin Gaethje. And of course, Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria. He's definitely earned that as well. I do not want to see Max Holloway step in at short notice and lose some of his aura, some of his shine, just to fix Conor McGregor's mistakes. I would rather see Max Holloway fight for something that he absolutely deserves, which is why I prefer the Max Holloway over Alexander, which is why I prefer Alexander Volkanovski over Max Holloway. Alexander Volkanovski's career, as much as I love him, is in the position where we can sort of throw him to the shark. The only issue again is the weight. I don't know if Michael Chandler can make 155, and I do not want to see Max Holloway fight Michael Chandler at 170. That leaves us with Michael Chandler versus Charles Oliveira. Fun fight. Can be done at 170. Actually means something in the division as well. It's the perfect co-main event, but it certainly does not justify a main event spot, and it does not justify mid-level seating prices at $3,000. So I do think you make that fight, but I also think that you squeeze it in as the feature fight and leave Jamal Hill versus Carlos Ulberg as the co-main event. But that still leaves you with, what are we going to do for a main event at UFC 303? Well, it's time to call up the company man. Listen, Sean Strickland is a company man, and he deserves a rematch with Dricus du Plessis. But I'm not saying that you do Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis. No. I'm saying that you do Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira for the light heavyweight title. That is a banger fight that does justify a very high ticket price. Certainly not as high as what the UFC is charging, but it does justify a very high ticket price. It does save a pay-per-view all on its own. It also allows the UFC to let Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland do their rematch and then slot Israel Adesanya back in. If he wants to move back down, he totally can. Whatever, he should be fighting a contender, but that's neither here nor there. It allows Dricus and Sean Strickland to do what they need to do and gives Israel Adesanya a good comeback fight against Alex Pereira at light heavyweight. It is a massive storyline, and I've talked to some of the people in my live streams about this. They think that it needs more time. For a fight that big, it needs more time to promote. I disagree. I think the bigger the fight, the less time to promote that it needs. Think about this, right? Back in the day when you were first getting into the sport, maybe on the building side or in the office, you'd know someone who was really into the UFC, who was really into MMA, and you would ask them and talk to them about what fights are there this weekend. And it was always the bigger fights that they got more excited about and that you would tend to tune into. It was the more low-level fights that the people aren't interested in. The bigger fights, the ones that appeal to the casual audience, almost sell themselves, especially when it's on short notice, because it gets you talking about it, it gets me talking about it, it gets all of us talking about it, it gets people in the office and at the building site talking about it. This short notice, crazy fight, massive step up, and people choose to go, yeah, you know what, I am going to watch that this weekend. And it actually brings more eyes to it because of how crazy the situation is. Alex Pereira wants to keep fighting, wants to stay active. The only reason that he didn't fight in Brazil was because of a broken toe. I'm sure his toe is fine. Israel Adesanya says that he is ready to come back. Izzy has been a hell of a company man, and the company has been good to Izzy. They are willing to throw him back in there with Dricus du Plessis when he doesn't deserve it. So I think it's time for Izzy to do the UFC a favor for all the favors that the UFC have done. Alex Pereira 100% takes that fight no matter what. And if you put them at UFC 303 with Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler as the feature fight, Jamal Hill versus Carlos Ulberg as the co-main event, 5 rounds, you have got a perfectly acceptable UFC 303. Whether or not people still want to pay $3,000 to sit in the middle tier of the arena, that's their business. But that's the way that I would set things up if I was the UFC. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comments. Which way do you see that fight going if they did fight again? Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira for the light heavyweight title. Let me know down there in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We are pushing on to 1,000 subscribers. So if you could help me out with that, that would be bloody awesome. Until then, I will see you all in the next video.